Little Journeys to the Homes of Good Men and Great. Thomas Carlyle. On my way to Dumfries, I stopped overnight at Gretna Green, which, as all fair maidens know, is in Scotland, just over the border from England. To my delight, I found that the coming of runaway couples to Gretna Green was not entirely a matter of the past, for the very evening I arrived, a blushing pair came to the inn and inquired for a quote-unquote minister. The lady fair was a little stout and worthy swain several years older than my fancy might have wished, but still I did not complain. The landlord's boy was dispatched to the rectory around the corner and soon returned with the reverend gentleman. I was an uninvited guest in the little parlor, but no one observed that my wedding garment was only a cycling costume, and I was not challenged. After the ceremony, the several other witnesses filed past the happy couple, congratulating them and kissing the bride. I did likewise, and was greeted with a resounding smack, which surprised me a bit, but I managed to ask, "Did you run away?" "No," said the groom, "no, her was a widdy. We just coom from Ecclefechan." Then, lowering his voice to a confidential whisper, "We're going back on the morrow. It's cheaper than to ha' a big weddin'." This answer banished all tender sentiment from me and made useless my plans for a dainty love story. But I seized upon the name of the place from whence they came. Ecclefechan? Ecclefechan. Why, that's where Carlyle was born. "Aye, sir, and he's buried there. A great mon he was, but an infidel." 10 miles beyond Gretna Green is Ecclefechan, a little village of stucco houses all stretched out on one street. Plain, homely, rocky, and unromantic is the country around about, and plain, homely, and unromantic is the little house where Carlyle was born. The place is shown the visitor by a good old dame who takes one from room to room, giving a little lecture meanwhile in a mixture of Gaelic and English, which was quite beyond my ken. Several relics of interest are shown, and although the house is almost precisely like all others in the vicinity, imagination throws round it all a roseate wreath of fancies. It has been left on record that up to the year when Carlyle was married, his most pleasurable times were those when he enjoyed a quiet pipe with his mother. To few men, indeed, is this felicity vouchsafed, but for those who have eaten oatmeal porridge in the wayside cottages of bonny Scotland, or who love to linger over the Cotter's Saturday night, there is a touch of tender pathos in the picture. The stone floor, the bare whitewashed walls, the peat smoldering on the hearth, sending out long fitful streaks that dance among the rafters overhead, and the mother and son sitting there, watching the coals, silent. The woman takes a small twig from a bundle of sticks, reaches over, lights it, applies it to her pipe, takes a few whiffs, and passes the light to her son. Then they talk in low, earnest tones of man's duty to man and man's duty to God. And it was this mother who first applied the spark that fired Carlyle's ambition. It was from her that he got the germ of those talents which have made the name illustrious. Yet this woman could barely read and did not learn to write until her firstborn had gone away from the home nest. Then it was that she sharpened a gray goose quill and labored long and patiently, practicing with this instrument, said to be mightier than the sword, and with ink she herself had mixed, all that she might write a letter to her boy, and how sweetly, tenderly, homely, and loving are these letters as we read them today. James Carlyle, with his own hands, built in 1790 this house at Ecclefechan. The same year he married an excellent woman, a second cousin, by name Janet Carlyle. She lived but a year. The poor husband was heartbroken, and declared, as many men under like conditions had done before and have done since, that his sorrow was inconsolable, and he vowed that he would walk through life and down to his death alone. But it is a matter for congratulation that he broke his vow. In 2 years he married Margaret Aitken, a serving woman. She bore 9 children. Thomas was the eldest and the only one who proved recreant to the religious faith of his fathers. One of the brothers moved to Shiawassee County, Michigan, where I had the pleasure of calling on him some years ago. A hard-headed man he was, sensible, earnest, honest, with a stubby beard and rich brogue. He held the office of school trustee, also that of poundmaster, and I was told that he served his township loyally and well. This worthy man looked with small favor on the literary pretensions of his brother Thomas, and twice wrote him long letters expostulating with him on his religious vagaries. I knew no good could come of it, sorrowfully said he, and so I left him. But I inquired of several of the neighbors what they thought of Thomas Carlyle, and I found that they did not think of Thomas Carlyle at all, and I mounted my beast and rode away. Thomas Carlyle was educated for the kirk, and it was a cause of much sorrow to his parents that he could not accept its beliefs. He has been spoken of as England's chief philosopher, yet he subscribed to no creed, nor did he formulate one. However, in latter-day pamphlets, he partially prepares a catechism for a part of the brute creation. He supposes that all swine of superior logical powers have a belief, and as they are unable to express it, he essays the task for them. The following are a few of the postulates in this creed of the Brotherhood of Latter-day Swine. Question: who made the pig? Answer: the pork butcher. Question: what is the whole duty of pigs? Answer: it is the mission of universal pighood, and the duty of all pigs at all times is to diminish the quantity of attainable swill and increase the unattainable. This is the whole duty of pigs. Question: what is pig poetry? Answer: it is the universal recognition of pigs' wash and ground barley, and the felicity of pigs whose trough has been set in order and who have enough. Question: what is justice in pigdom? Answer: it is the sentiment in pig nature, sometimes called revenge, indignation, etc., which, if one pig provoke another, comes out in more or less destructive manner. Hence, laws are necessary, amazing quantities of laws, defining what pigs shall not do. Question: what do you mean by equity? Answer: equity consists in getting your share from the universal swine trough and part of another's. Question: what is meant by your share? Answer: my share is getting whatever I can contrive to seize without being made up into side meat. I have slightly abridged this little extract and inserted it here to show the sympathy which Mr. Carlyle had for the dumb brute. One of America's great men, in a speech delivered not long since, said, "From Scotch manners, Scotch religion, and Scotch whiskey, good Lord deliver us." My experience with these 3 articles has been somewhat limited, but Scotch manners remind me of chestnut burrs, not handsome without, but good within. For when you have gotten beyond the rough exterior of Sandy, you generally find a heart warm, tender, and generous. Scotch religion is another chestnut burr, but then you need not eat the shuck if you fear it will not agree with your inward state. Nevertheless, if the example of royalty is of value, the fact can be stated that Victoria, Queen of Great Britain and Empress of India, is a Presbyterian. That is, she is a Presbyterian about 1/2 of the time, when she is in Scotland, for she is the head of the Scottish Kirk. When she is in England, of course, she is an Episcopalian. We have often been told that religion is largely a matter of geography, and here is a bit of something that looks like proof. Of Scotch whiskey, I am not competent to speak, so that subject must be left to the experts. But a Kentucky colonel at my elbow declares that it cannot be compared with the bluegrass article, though I trust that no one will be prejudiced against it on that account. Scotch intellect, however, is worthy of our serious consideration. It is a bold, rocky headland standing out into the tossing sea of the unknown. Assertive? Yes. Stubborn? Most surely. Proud? By all means. Twice as many pilgrims visit the grave of Burns as that of Shakespeare. Buckle declares, Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations has had a greater influence on civilization than any book ever writ, save none. And the average Scotchman knows his Carlyle a deal better than the average American does his Emerson. In fact, 4 times as many of Carlyle's books have been printed. When Carlyle took time to bring the ponderous machinery of his intellect to bear on a theme, he saw it through and through. The vividness of his imagination gives us a true insight into times long since gone by. It shows virtue her own feature, vice her own image, and the very age and body of the time his form and pressure. In history, he goes beyond the political and conventional, showing us the thought, the hope, the fear, the passion of the soul. His was the masculine mind. The divination and subtle intuitions which are to be found scattered throughout his pages, like violets growing among the rank swale of the prairies, all these sweet odorous things came from his wife. She gave him her best thought, and he greedily absorbed and unconsciously wrote it down as his own. There are those who blame and berate. Volumes have been written to show the inconsiderateness of this man toward the gentle lady who was his intellectual comrade. But they know not life who do this thing. It is a fact that Carlyle never rushed to pick up Jeannie's handkerchief. I admit that he could not bow gracefully, that he could not sing tenor, nor waltz, nor tell funny stories, nor play the maudlin. And if I had been his neighbor, I would not have attempted to teach him any of these accomplishments. Once he took his wife to the theater, and after the performance he accidentally became separated from her in the crowd, and trudged off home alone and went to bed forgetting all about her. But even for this I do not indict him. Mrs. Carlyle never upbraided him for this forgetfulness. Neither did she relate the incident to anyone, and for these things I to her now reverently lift my hat. Jeannie Welsh Carlyle had the capacity for pain, as it seems all great souls have. She suffered, but then suffering is not all suffering, and pain is not all pain. Life is often dark, but then there are rifts in the clouds when we behold the glorious deep blue of the sky. Not a day passes but that the birds sing in the branches and the tree-tops poise backward and forward in restful rhythmic harmony, and never an hour goes by but that hope bears us up on her wings as the eagle does her young. And ever just before the year dies and the frost comes, the leaves take on a gorgeous hue, and the color of the flowers then puts to shame for brilliancy all the plainer petals of springtime. And I know Mr. and Mrs. Carlyle were happy, so happy at times that they laughed and cried for joy. Jeannie gave all, and she saw her best thought used, carried further, written out, and given to the world as that of another, but she uttered no protest. Xantippe lives in history only because she sought to worry a great philosopher. We remember the daughter of Herodias because she demanded the head, not the heart, of a good man. Goneril and Regan because they trod upon withered soul of their sire. Lady Macbeth because she lured her liege to murder. Charlotte Corday for the dagger thrust. Lucretia Borgia for her poison. Sapphira for her untruth. Jael because she pierced the brain of Sisera with a rusty nail instead of an idea. Delilah for the reason that she deprived Samson of his source of strength. And in the Westminster Review for May 1894, Ouida makes the flat statement that for every man of genius who had been helped by a woman, 10 have been dragged down. But Jeannie Welsh Carlyle lives in the hearts of all who reverence the sweet, the gentle, the patient, the earnest, the loving spirit of the womanly woman, lives because she ministered to the needs of a great man. She was ever a frail body. Several long illnesses kept her to her bed for weeks, but she recovered from these, even in spite of the doctors who thoroughly impressed both herself and her husband with the thought of her frailty. On April 21st, 1866, she called her carriage, as was her custom, and directed the driver to go through the park. She carried a book in her hands, and smiled a greeting to a friend as the brougham moved away from the little street where they lived. The driver drove slowly, drove for an hour, 2. He got down from his box to receive the orders of his mistress, touched his hat, as he opened the carriage door, but no kindly eyes looked into his. She sat back in the corner as if resting, the shapely head a little thrown forward, the book held gently in the delicate hands, but the fingers were cold and stiff. Jeanie Welsh was dead, and Thomas Carlyle was alone.